Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
What does an Attorney General actually do day to day?
All is chaos.
What is your message to those AI companies that have these products that interact with children?
As you design your product, you need to be thinking like a parent, and you need to have the kid's best interest at heart.
And I've heard your prior interviews about your time at Harvard Law School, and you said you were both educated there and radicalized there.
Yes.
What did you mean by radicalized? And what's your definition of woke? I was next going to ask you, are you woke yourself?
I think by any reasonable measure, the answer is no.
Right now in the AG's office, what are your key priorities?
It's worked out really well. The taxes are very low.
Can you confirm?
We have a really solid foundation in terms of the basic economics of the state. And as a result, we're prospering.
AGs now appear to have a much higher profile, a lot more power these days. Do you feel like that's the reality in today's political environment?
It's absolutely the reality, and it is a bad thing.
What is your perspective on the balance between federal government and state government AI regulation?
It's really important that we win the AI race, and it's transformative technology, but it also needs guardrails.
Hypothetically, if Tennessee is threatened with federal funding withholding, what would you do? Would you still push back against the administration and protect the LDIS Act's constitutionality, or try to enter into an agreement with the federal government to withhold enforcement of the LDIS Act? Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Mr. Skrmetti is the current Attorney General of Tennessee and has held this office since 2022. He was previously a federal prosecutor over in Memphis and also was a partner at a law firm in Tennessee. And he most recently served as chief counsel to Governor Bill Lee. So, Attorney General Skrmetti, I would like to know, you're now 3 years into your term. What are you most proud of so far?
So I think the best thing that I've done, and we've done some great cases here. We've done big cases with big impact. But the best thing that I've done is continue to build out the team here. We have great people. We have great attorneys, not just in the marquee positions, but all through the office. And we have great support staff. And at the end of the day, like, cases come and cases go. But if you build the institution up, that means that no matter what happens, we're going to be strongly positioned to take care of Tennessee's legal needs going forward.
Our viewers, they're both lawyers, legal professionals, but also the general public. So can you provide more clarity on what does an attorney general actually do day to day?
All is chaos. We represent the state in every facet of civil litigation. We have about 12,000 cases open at any given time, everything from employment cases, tax cases, torts against the state, to the big constitutional cases that people hear about, lawsuits against the federal government. We handle criminal appeals, so there's a lot of capital litigation that goes on, as well as all sorts of big criminal constitutional issues. And then, of course, consumer protection and antitrust, which is a huge part of our practice. So I interact with clients, I interact with legislators, I interact with opposing counsel. But a lot of what I do day to day is management. Just running the office, working with my team to make sure everything is continuing to move forward as it should. And then a good bit of it is communication and just explaining what we're doing to the outside world.
Quite a bit on your plate. You were originally born in Connecticut before coming over to Tennessee and becoming an attorney general. So what brought you to Tennessee? And is it the no state income tax? Because that's why I'm here.
It's a great reason to be here. I went to the Department of Justice after I clerked. So I went to law school. I worked for a judge for a year. And then I became a federal prosecutor. And the first place they sent me to do a federal case was Memphis. And Memphis is a great city. It had, at the time, a lot of very interesting crime. And so I flew down to work on a pretty complicated case. While I was in town, another big case came along, and there was just a lot of work in Memphis. I kept going back and back and back, and eventually got tired of being on planes. I got tired of living in Washington, D.C., and I felt like I could make a difference in Memphis, so I moved down.
It all started with law school, and you attended Harvard Law School, and I've heard your prior interviews about your time at Harvard Law School, and you said you were both educated there and radicalized there.
Yes.
What did you mean by radicalized? What color hair did you dye your hair to? Were you posting on social media all the time? How radical were you?
Quite the opposite. I was interested in politics, but I was pretty non-ideological when I went into law school. I was interested in business law. I was interested in IP. And I didn't really get worked up about big policy issues. There are some extremely opinionated people at Harvard Law School, and some of the opinions they have are just bonkers from my perspective. And so, having come from sort of an insulated perspective where, politics is important, but generally everybody's about in the same lane and you just need to figure out how to work through reasonable disagreements. I realized there was this whole separate vision of humanity that was motivating a lot of the political left, and it was taking the country in directions that were dangerous. Just this really unrealistic view of human nature, this idea of governmental power and of the courts as the panacea to all ills. And I think, government is necessary and useful, but it's not the be all end all. And we have to have limits. I mean, any given person given too much power is going to abuse it. And the idea of just loading up a bunch of unaccountable judges and bureaucrats with as much power as we can give them really seemed antithetical to, how America has worked and how it needs to work going forward.
You've spoken about being exposed to some of these, some people call it bonkers ideologies early on, including critical race theory, gender ideology. Do you think that elite law schools have gone too woke these days?
My impression is yes. I mean, I'm not there that much. I do some recruiting trips up to the Ivy League schools occasionally, but my impression is that there's still pretty radical places where, current Supreme Court jurisprudence is met with scorn, where although half of America approximately is Republican, you might find a solid 10% at these law schools and less than that on the faculties. So it's just skewed in a direction that makes it very unrepresentative of the country as a whole.
Mm-hmm. And what's your definition of woke? If you had to put a definition on it.
Oh gosh. See, I try to avoid using that word for exactly this reason.
I was next going to ask you, are you woke yourself?
I think by any reasonable measure, the answer is no. I would say woke is the idea that there are, overarching ideological commitments that supersede all law and tradition and history and provide a lens through which everything should be understood. I think the idea of woke is that what we have learned, what our prior generations worked toward, is egregiously wrong and evil. I just can't adopt that. But, it's the erasure of all of the successes that not just America, but like human culture has had for millennia. Just looking at what we've accomplished and saying this was bad and we could do better. And that is a dangerously unrealistic way forward.
From law school theory to actual practice, right now in the AG's office, what are your key priorities?
So the biggest priority overall is to keep Tennessee as self-governing as possible. We want to make sure that the people have agency to act through their elected representatives to determine as much of their government as they can. And that's pretty abstracted, but that's the big picture there. There's a lot of other stuff we have to do. We want to make sure that companies are held accountable, that they follow the law so that we have functional markets. If people don't trust that they're going to get what they pay for, that inhibits market activity, and that's bad for everybody. Certainly not fair to consumers. And especially when you're talking about really big companies, there's an asymmetry of power between the company and the individual consumer. So we help balance that out some. We want to enforce the law. We want to make sure that that both governments and people are held accountable to their obligations. And, the idea is Tennessee has been a very pro-business, generally pretty limited government place. And it's worked out really well. The taxes are very low.
Can you confirm?
We have a really solid foundation in terms of, the basic economics of the state. And as a result, we're prospering. And, that's a good thing. I want my kids, I want their kids to enjoy similar opportunities. So I want to keep that all going.
You mentioned consumer protection is protecting Tennesseans against these big companies, and you've gone after robocall scam companies, ticket scalpers, Medicaid fraud. So my question for you is this: what are you going to do about the serious financial and emotional harm caused by the Tennessee Titans' dismal 2025 season? Many people were affected. I lost a lot of money. Well, my friends lost a lot of money.
Your friends did.
My friends lost a lot of money.
It's dangerous to say this. I grew up a Patriots fan. And so when Vrabel was the coach, it was really easy to get on board and say, here's one of my favorite players from before. He's at the helm of the team, new stadium coming. This is great. Then Vrabel got fired. It's been a rough season. I'm optimistic for the future. Every team goes through its rough patches. I remember when the Patriots were miserable and a lot of people had a hard time staying fans. And then you look at where it went from there, and it was awesome. So, I like to think still opportunity to buy in at the foundational layer of the Titans, and there are good days ahead. Nashville's a great city. I think the tax advantages of Tennessee will help the team. It's going to work out eventually, but it's a tough slog right now.
They did hire the old Jets coach, so I don't know how that's going to go, but we'll see. Maybe we'll revisit that next year. On a more serious note, one of your enforcement priorities has been going after fraud. And we've seen in other states like Minnesota some massive fraud in terms of Somali daycare center scams and much, much more. What is the Tennessee version of Somali daycare centers? Do we have massive fraud on that scale? And if so, if not, why not?
There are some jurisdictional wrinkles to investigating some of that stuff that I think are being looked at and worked out as we speak. I'm not aware of any massive fraud. There have been some allegations that we looked at of some really extensive fraud in a couple areas, and the allegations just didn't pan out. People saw something, they interpreted it one way. It did not appear that their interpretation was consistent with the overall body of evidence. One of the reasons maybe we have less fraud here than elsewhere is there's a smaller welfare state. We run a leaner government, so there's less opportunity for it. But that doesn't mean it's not happening. Another issue is we have fairly atomized enforcement authorities. So the DAs have all the criminal authority to prosecute. We've got different agencies, and they usually do a good job of working together, but there's still a little bit of friction when you have multiple agencies that have to come in. And so there's not the kind of statewide universal apparatus for investigating potential misconduct that some states have. So it's a little bit trickier for us to do it, and there has to be a lot of teamwork to enforce.
We're going to take a little break to shift to some lighter topics before returning to some of the heavier questions. So first question, what is your favorite local bar in Nashville?
Legends is great.
It's a good one. What about Mother's Ruin?
I've never been there.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got 4 little kids. I don't do a whole lot of going out these days.
That's fair. So I hear through a source I cannot confirm or deny. It might be Brandon Smith, but
It may well be.
I'm a journalist, so I don't reveal my sources. So it might be him, might be not. He says that allegedly you enjoy video games and fantasy novels. Can you confirm or deny that?
I do. Not as much as I did when I was in college, and not as much as hopefully I will when I retire. That is one of my hobby outlets. So the Lord of the Rings extended editions were back in the theaters a couple weekends ago. And I took my 12-year-old, he had never seen them. And we really, really, really enjoyed that. And we've read The Hobbit together. And, I'm reading C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy right now. So yeah, I do. And, for video games, we busted out GoldenEye. Our internet was down in the ice storm. So we played some N64. And that was really fun too.
Very nice. It's a safer play than bringing them to Legends. So maybe in the future that'll change. Given your love of literature, I'm going to read you a quote from one of our greatest orators of our generation, who's also president, and I want to get your reaction to this quote. There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you can't get fooled again. What's your reaction to that quote?
It's profound.
Is that a true saying in Tennessee?
Maybe not verbatim.
He was close. That's from President Bush. So another lighter topic, bachelorette parties in Nashville. Should they get criminal immunity?
There's been a lot of restriction locally on the party wagons. We used to have them come by the office occasionally. And I feel like if your brand nationally and internationally is the place that people come to have fun, that's a really good brand, and you don't want to squash that too much. So I know the noise is super annoying and the traffic can be annoying, and sometimes there's drunkenly inappropriate behavior, and that's bad. People need to follow the law. But I do think that, there is a virtue in being a destination. And when people get really excited to come to Nashville and the whole party scene is part of it, there's got to be a way to make that coexist with, the day-to-day needs of everybody here. That's a good thing. Other cities would kill to have that kind of branding.
Definitely a great time. To shift back to more serious topics, AGs now appear to have a much higher profile, a lot more power these days. Do you feel like that's the reality in today's political environment?
It's absolutely the reality, and it is a bad thing. People want the AGs to come in and wave a magic wand and fix all the problems. And that's at the expense of democracy. When you turn to the courts to resolve all of the big disputes, you're taking the ability of the people to make their own decisions, to compromise, to find lasting solutions away. And so I think the increasing power of AGs is in part an artifact of standing law and the Supreme Court's approach to letting different litigants address big issues. But part of it is our increasingly failed ability to govern ourselves through the traditional mechanisms. So, everyone wants the guy on the white horse to ride in and fix things. Often the AG is the most apparent person to do that, at least these days. And, it's not good. Courts are there to keep guardrails up on what the government does and to resolve disputes in a constructive fashion, when people are trying to figure out what the law means and how it applies. But the big policy decisions, the solutions to ongoing problems, that has to happen through the people, through their elected representatives, through an executive branch that's enforcing the laws, as opposed to just fighting out in court about what's right, what's wrong, what the law should be.
One area where we see and will likely see much more AG activity is in the space of AI. We saw it just a couple weeks ago with the Kentucky Attorney General bringing an enforcement suit based on data privacy laws against an AI company. And Tennessee is pretty uniquely situated because of our creator economy, with the Elvis Act getting passed about 2 years ago. And the Elvis Act, for background for the viewers, is a law that essentially protects people's voices so that AI companies cannot clone them and then monetize off them. That is now in the crosshairs of a President Trump executive order on artificial intelligence that purportedly seeks to withhold state funding, also sets up an AI litigation task force to challenge state laws like the Elvis Act. What is your perspective on the balance between federal government and state government AI regulation?
I think in the long run, we don't want to have a 50-state fractured approach to AI. It's really important that we win the AI race, and it's transformative technology that needs to be encouraged, but it also needs guardrails. Right now, the only oversight is coming from the states. There's a vacuum at the federal level in terms of any sort of scrutiny of potentially bad things the AI companies are doing. And so the states have a really urgently necessary role to play. I think the executive order is an example of maybe an ambitious policy approach that's not super supported by the law. I've previously threatened to sue if there's any interference with Tennessee's Elvis Act, or especially with my authority under the consumer protection laws to protect Tennesseans, especially Tennessee kids, from products that are dangerous for them. And I continue to think that the federal government likely did not intend to address those kinds of laws. I mean, I've been told that Tennessee's laws are not what the executive order is about. If there ever is any friction there, we will fight like crazy to protect Tennesseans. In the long run, a relatively light touch that looks at the downstream impact of AI products and finds ways to limit the harm is a lot better than a bunch of state governments trying to micromanage how models are trained up or what products are permissible. It needs to be a thriving and innovative ecosystem. So we have an important role to play, but we really collectively as states need to be careful not to step on this, because if China gets ahead of us, that's a real problem.
I also spoke to Attorney General William Tong over in Connecticut. He expressed a similar sentiment that this executive order may not be well grounded in law. However, it also dictates that federal agencies should review their discretionary funding. So that's one mechanism where federal agencies do have some pull over the states. Hypothetically, if Tennessee is threatened with federal funding withholding, what would you do? Would you still push back against the administration and protect the Elvis Act's constitutionality, or try to enter into an agreement with the federal government to withhold enforcement of the Elvis Act?
I don't think it'll ever come to that, but if it did come to that, we'd look really hard at the spending clause. And I think there's a lot of room going forward for more development of jurisprudence around that. I think the federal government under both parties has gotten a little bit too aggressive in terms of spending clause leverage, and that's something that deserves some judicial scrutiny.
You mentioned that one area that you want to focus on is protecting children, and you recently brought a lawsuit against Roblox, which is a platform where kids go on, also a lot of pedophiles, and that's in the lawsuit as well. Can you tell us more about that lawsuit? What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, what we want there is for parents to be able to make an informed decision. That's the number one thing. Roblox was saying it was the safest place online for kids. It very clearly was not. There were warnings for years and years and years that pedophiles were using the site, using the opportunity to exchange things of value with minor users, the ability to communicate with them, to lure kids into compromising situations. And, it's hard to be a parent these days. There are a lot of threats out there. If a company is lying about how safe it is, that seems like a pretty high priority. Parents need to be able to make informed decisions. So the number one thing we want out of them is to tell the truth. In the long run, I would love for it to be a safe platform that does have a lot of mechanisms in place to protect kids. I know they're scrambling now that they've got scrutiny on them to try to change systems. The representations they've made in the past were just not supported by the facts on the ground, and they need to be held accountable for that so that other companies don't do the same thing.
You've brought this lawsuit against Roblox to protect children. One really hot issue right now is children's interactions with AI chatbots. And I mentioned the Kentucky enforcement based on data privacy laws. Do you think there are enough laws on the books here in Tennessee to protect children against potential poor interactions and outcomes in terms of children using AI chatbots? Are there enough protections there?
We'll see where the legislature wants to go. They may have some new ideas for laws on that. I think our basic consumer protection laws offer a lot in terms of letting us go after companies that abuse the relationship they have with their child users. We've got litigation going on with social media right now based on the impact on child users. And, there's always room for more refinement there. But if a company is engaged in really bad misconduct, if, you have chatbots that are having sexual conversations with 8-year-olds, if you have chatbots encouraging people towards suicide, we do not have to sit around and wait for new laws to be passed. We have authority in the AG's offices to go after that conduct and to make it stop and to hold the companies accountable.
What is your message to those AI companies that have these products that interact with children?
As you design your product, you need to be thinking like a parent, and you need to have the kid's best interest at heart. They are not something to be commodified. They are your users who are giving you the privilege of access to them in a very competitive market, and you need to do right to help them flourish. And if you don't, you will be held accountable.
You've been in office for 3 years now. Besides having to do this interview with me, what's been the worst part of the job?
I don't know. I mean, every other job that I've had, if I ever showed up in the media, it was because I'd done something really wrong. Like I was a background guy. And then all of a sudden I got this job and had to start, taking responsibility for a very large organization. If you're just doing your job, you don't have to worry about perception. You don't have to worry about bad faith political hits and, all that kind of thing. So it's a little bit frustrating to be, an attorney doing attorney things and having, the political drama going on in ways that I'm not really equipped to respond to. I mean, I'm not elected. I represent all the members of the legislature. So if someone starts taking cheap shots at me, I can't turn around and take cheap shots back. We just sort of have to keep going.
Do you wish you could?
Sometimes, yeah.
Do you want to take any now?
I would love to, but I'm not gonna.
We'll do it off the record after. It's okay. You mentioned at the outset that one of your big goals is to hire good people and have to leave a strong office in place, even if you move on to another role in the future. What do you look for when you're hiring in the AG's office?
So there's a couple things. Integrity is the number one thing. I mean, we need people who are going to do right with the responsibility that they're given for the state. We want people who are humble. If folks are too full of themselves, they're not focused on the people they're supposed to be serving, and this is a service job. We want people who are smart and hardworking, but we also want people who recognize that they could be making a lot more money in the private sector, but they want to be here because they believe in the mission of public service. They believe in what Tennessee's doing. They like the flexibility to have more of a family life or, more of a home life. and they're consciously choosing this because it's the right job for them.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to show you an exhibit here.
Uh-oh.
Exhibit A. Can you tell me what this is? Mr. Skrmetti, can you tell me what Exhibit A says?
It is an application to the Tennessee Attorney General's office.
What year is that from?
2022.
I applied back in the day. Didn't get the job. Maybe I was full of myself.
No, you just looking at the first couple lines of this, I'm not sure what happened there.
I'll say that I haven't done much in the past 3 years, so I'm just following up on my application. I did become proficient in Microsoft Excel.
Outstanding.
So I just got to update that.
That's a material addition to the application. No, I don't like. Usually, if someone comes here applying as a big law associate, you know, that's an indicia of having made it through a pretty rigorous screening mechanism, and often that helps people, you know, get in. Granted, this was right after I came into office.
I kid. And I must say, I don't know if you remember this, but when I was a law student, I reached out to you and you actually took about 45 minutes to talk to me. So I do appreciate it.
I was thinking that. Yeah.
I didn't want to ruin it before, but yeah, we'd actually spoken. I reached out. I was I think I was a 2L at HLS and reached out to you. And I think you were still chief counsel to Governor Lee at the time.
Yeah.
You took the time. So I really do appreciate that.
Well, that's my pleasure. And it drives my staff crazy, but I still try to do that as much as I can. You know, when I was a law student, there were a lot of people who took the time to talk through public service opportunities. I just love being able to pay it forward. I feel like that's one way of expressing gratitude for the folks who did it with me.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And of course, I still remember that. And that leads me to my last question. What legacy do you want to leave behind in the AG's office?
There are a couple things. The first is I want us to be the best AG's office in the country. I want to make sure that we've got the personnel here that people think twice before resorting to litigation against Tennessee, in large part because I think it's just so bad when people don't like the policies that come out of the democratic process and immediately resort to litigation. It makes everybody feel like the political process doesn't really matter. And they're just, you know, whatever judge gets the case is ultimately the decision maker. And it sucks the legitimacy and the vitality out of the democratic system. You know, I would like for us to be contributing to creating a very innovative, prosperous environment in Tennessee. I want the AG's office to be helping the state along rather than serving as an obstacle to people coming here to do exciting things in the business world. You know, we have the appointment system here. We've got a very weird appointment system. The Supreme Court of Tennessee appoints the AG. We're the only state that does that. I really want that to stay the process for picking the AG in Tennessee. I think it's been really good for us. It keeps the office focused on serving client needs. It allows a lot of continuity in ways that a 4-year elected term would not. You know, I understand in a lot of offices, every 2 years, things start to slow down because the boss is focused on reelection, fundraising, you know, campaigning. We never have to worry about that. And I think it's been really good for us. At a time when a lot of institutions are under great pressure, you know, I want this to be a resilient office that is providing the best possible legal advice, best possible representation to the state. I'd like for us to have more satellite presence. We're mostly in Nashville now. We've got a Memphis office and some really small offices in Knoxville and Chattanooga and Jackson. You know, I want to expand those offices. I want to get something in Upper East Tennessee and just make sure that we're not too insulated and that there are points of connection between the office and the whole state, you know, and I want to keep salaries high. I think it's really important to be able to recruit and retain good people. Mm-hmm. And if we can be established as, I mean, we're never going to be competitive with the private sector, but if we can be established as a good paying government job, that's going to help with all the other goals. We'll be able to keep the personnel here that let the office do what it needs to do for the state.
Mm. Do you have any closing thoughts?
AG World is a great place to practice law. We'll talk after this about your application and future opportunities. But now you know, the federal government is always going to be the biggest government in the United States. But if you look at DOJ right now, it's smaller than it used to be, and it's not able to do as much. There's more and more role for the states to step in with consumer protection enforcement. Antitrust is another huge area where there's got to be an increased state presence. You know, there's fascinating constitutional litigation So I hope more people look to the states as great opportunities to have super interesting, super meaningful practice and to really be able to give back for, most people who go to law school are in a very privileged position. And I think it's important that people who have been given advantages by society recognize there's an obligation there and find ways to pay it back. One way to pay it back is to work for the state in an AG's office.
Mm-hmm. Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti, thank you so much for joining us here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.